Well, hello everyone. My name is Michel. Thank you very much for joining us and a happy and importantly, healthy new year to all of you. Today, I am delighted to host Dr. Simon Stott, the Director of Research at Cure Parkinson's, the well-known charity. And in what is now becoming a no silver bullet tradition, Simon will be going to talk to us about his main Parkinson's research takeaways from 2025 and also the research results he will be looking for in 2026. So before we start, as always, I would like to remind everyone that this session is for information and education purposes only. If you are seeking medical advice, please make sure that you consult a medical professional, if you know that. And of course, there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So for those who join us for the first time and don't know no silver bullet yet, no silver bullet stands for a simple idea. The idea is that managing Parkinson's requires a multi-pronged strategy. It can't depend on just one single bullet. Maybe it will one day, but at the moment, it's not the case yet. So we aim to share the expertise you need to build a truly holistic lifestyle that includes medication, exercise, relaxation, and technology. And our goal is to keep you motivated and, like tonight, informed as you manage your symptoms and work to slow progression. As you probably know already, we post the recordings of our webinars on YouTube and on Spotify, so you can either watch us or take us for a walk in your headphones. The YouTube channel has just been redesigned over the weekend, so please have a look. I hope you will like the increased clarity we have brought to it. And details are available in the chat section at the bottom of your screen. The details for the YouTube and Spotify links, as well as on our website. And our website is nosilverbullet4pd.com, nosilverbullet4pd.com. But let's come back to today's topic and to Dr. Simon Stott. Simon, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us tonight. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm just going to share my screen. Why is it doing that? Hang on. Apologies, folks.
No worries.
Let me try it like this. And
I think you may be not sharing the right screen.
Can you see this?
I can see myself.
Oh.
In the screen you share. So maybe you have several screens you can choose from.
No, I'm doing it through the web browser, and it's not giving me the option of... Oh, no, wait, now it's giving me the option. Sorry, it's a bit like
Perfect.
me.
Here we go. We're in business now. A bit rusty after the celebrations of Christmas.
Okay, I'm full screen there, so hopefully you can see everything.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, folks, about the technical interruption. So, yeah, my name's Simon. I'm the Director of Research at Cure Parkinson's. We're a medical research charity focused on disease modification for Parkinson's. I also run a small website called The Science of Parkinson's, where I try to keep up to date with what's going on in Parkinson's research. And what I'd like to do tonight is to give you a flavor for some of the research that caught our attention in 2025 and also what to look out for in 2026. I'm going to start off with the disclosure statement. I am an employee of Cure Parkinson's. For the sake of transparency, I've inserted the Cure Parkinson's logo to display where the charity is a funder or a supporter of a project or a clinical trial. And as I say, on the menu tonight, we're going to look at what happened in Parkinson's research in 2025. Very high on the agenda there is the GLP-1 receptor research, the clinical trial results that came through. I'll explain what a GLP-1 receptor agonist is very shortly. And then we'll discuss new clinical trial platforms, a very exciting development for the field, before we delve into some interesting new clinical, new research results, excuse me. And then with regards to 2026, we'll be looking out for specific clinical trial results the World Parkinson's Congress, and some other interesting aspects of research coming. So diving straight in, what happened in 2025? So the GLP-1 receptor agonist research was key, as I suggested, among the activities of 2025. For those who are unfamiliar, this is a class of drug that's used for the treatment of type 2 diabetes and also indicated for weight loss and reducing appetite. GLP-1 receptor agonists are, they mimic a naturally occurring gut hormone called GLP-1 or glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor, which is, as I say, a naturally occurring protein. It helps to control insulin. And a few years ago, in 2017, there was some very encouraging clinical trial data from a phase 2 study with a GLP-1 receptor agonist called exenatide. And it was tested in 60 participants. 30 of them were on drug and 30 of them took a placebo for 48 weeks. The placebo-treated group continued to progress with their Parkinson's symptoms, while the exenatide group improved and stabilized across the rest of the 48-week treatment period. And this got the community very excited. But unfortunately, last year we had the publication of a phase 3 clinical trial that tested the drug against placebo in 196 individuals for the timeframe of almost 2 years. And they found no difference whatsoever between the exenatide and the placebo treated group. And this trial was conducted by Professor Tom Faultini at UCL here in London. It was conducted across the UK, and it was extremely well conducted. They used a very well designed study, and these guys are the best of the best. So it's not a case of what went wrong with the trial. It was a very clean result, and if you want to see a presentation by Professor Faultini, you can have a look at this link or use the QR code to see him presenting the data and discussing his thoughts about the outcome. And if you don't have time to copy all that down at the moment or scan that QR code, you can just email me and I'm happy to forward you a copy of these slides. So this result was in contrast to, firstly, the 2017 phase 2 result, but also to another phase 2 study looking at a different GLP-1 receptor agonist called lixisenatide. And that study was conducted in France across 22 research centers, testing the drug on 156 people for 12 months. So they were either on placebo or they were on lixisenatide. And in that study, they saw the same thing. The folks that were on placebo continued to progress with their Parkinson's symptoms, and those that were on lixisenatide stabilized across the 12-month treatment period. So we've got a very mixed bag of results. And just recently, we've had the Stockholm exenatide study present their findings. It was an 18-month study, a phase 2 study of 60 participants, and they found no difference between exenatide and placebo. And what's curious here is that the drug that's being used across all of the exenatide studies is exactly the same. So in one study, we've got a very positive result, and across other studies, we've got negative results. So it's really time for the field to sit down and review the data and consider what next steps to take. And at the same time, Parkinson's is not the only one that's been looking at GLP-1 receptor agonists. These drugs have also been tested in Alzheimer's. And at the end of last year, we learned that a very large study conducted by Novo Nordisk, one of the big pharmaceutical companies that make GLP-1 receptor agonists, they found that after testing one of their GLP-1 receptor agonists, semaglutide, in 3,800 patients with mild Alzheimer's, there was no difference whatsoever between those that were on the drug and those that were on placebo after 2 years of treatment. And you can see on the graphs there There were two studies, and both of them have very little daylight between the lines representing the semaglutide-treated group and the placebo-treated group. And a second Alzheimer's study, which was conducted here in the UK, a phase 2 study, so slightly smaller than the Novo Nordisk studies, that also found no difference between placebo and liraglutide-treated individuals, liraglutide being another GLP-1 agonist. So what are our takeaways from this research? Firstly, a very mixed bag of results. And the question is always asked, should there be another study, a new study? I think before we even consider that, we have to address a lot of questions. We tried to move very quickly to replicate the initial encouraging findings from the phase 2 study. And there's a lot of questions that needed to be addressed before we did that. So we were acting with urgency as opposed to agency. But there are questions around the brain penetrance of these agents, for example. How much of it's actually getting into the brain? Is enough getting into the brain over time? And also target engagement. How can we be sure that we're hitting the right target when we're conducting these studies? And then there's also the question of patient stratification. Are we including the right, are we giving this drug to the right people to actually see a response? And then another question that could be asked is, are these GLP-1 receptor agonists enough by themselves? Should they be potentially administered in some sort of combination? So these are the sort of questions that the field needs to step away and address while we wait for further results coming down the pipe. And that's something to look out for in 2026. Firstly, we've got the publication of the Stockholm exenatide results. We're still waiting on the full package of data there. There's also a study, a phase 2 study in Japan called the Most Able study. And that's looking at a GLP-1 receptor agonist called semaglutide and 100 participants. So that will be hopefully reporting out in this year. And then we've also got phase 1 testing currently ongoing by a company called Kyrea Pharmaceuticals. They're testing a drug called KP405. And this is an interesting drug because it targets not only GLP-1 receptor, but also another receptor called CHIP. So you've got a dual agonist, and it's also been designed to get into the brain. So this might give us a clearer indication as to whether brain penetrance is important for GLP-1 receptor agonists, but also whether just hitting the GLP-1 receptor is enough, or if we need to be hitting multiple targets with some of these treatments. So that was one of the big areas, at least for me, with regards to the research on Parkinson's in 2025, the GLP-1 receptor field. Then there is the new clinical trial platforms being launched. And this is primarily around this idea of multi-arm, multi-stage clinical trial platforms. So typically when we do a clinical trial, you have a placebo and you have a drug and you compare them. And at the end of the trial, you look at the results and you determine whether the drug has actually had an effect. It's a very slow and expensive way of testing drugs. And so what researchers have been doing in other fields of medicine they've been building platforms which test multiple drugs against a single placebo. And over time, if one of those drugs is found to not be working, they will remove that drug and they will insert a new drug. So you have a continuous conveyor belt or a highway of drugs being tested. And here in the UK, we've had a very exciting program called the Edmund J. Safra Accelerating Clinical Trials in Parkinson's, or EJS Act PD. And it's an initiative that was set up to build a nationwide phase 3 MAMS, multi-arm, multi-stage clinical trial platform. And if you're interested in partaking in this project, you can use the QR code or you could use the website link there on the slide. But it's been a wonderful initiative to be part of, because in the building of this platform, which is now up and running and ongoing, there have been many working groups looking at different aspects of the trial, such as outcomes or infrastructure or treatment selection. And at every single level of this project, people with Parkinson's have been involved and been contributing. So it's really been a magnificent example of patient engagement, and I think it will be replicated going forward. It will represent the gold standard in terms of how these things should be done. And as I say, it's up and running. The first two drugs, terazosin and telmisartan, are already being administered along with a placebo. And in 2026, we've got the third drug, the third arm, being employed. So as you can see in the bar graph on the bottom of the screen, you've got a placebo arm. So some of the people in the trial will be randomized to placebo. And then there'll be other people in the trial that will be randomized to treatment A, which might be terazosin. And then there'll be a third group of people who will be randomized into the arm, which is telmisartan. And they won't know what they're being randomized into. This is completely blinded. The participant and the investigators are blind. But this is the whole point of the clinical trial. This is the best test for whether a drug is actually going to have an effect. And there'll be continuous analysis across time, monitoring these participants. And that's actually one of the hidden gems about a program like this, in that people are always complaining that they don't get enough time with their clinicians. So by getting involved with a clinical trial platform like this, you will have a lot more time with clinicians. So you'll be able to ask questions about aspects of your condition that might be Parkinson's related or might not, but there'll be the opportunity to actually get those issues addressed. So it's one of those sort of hidden, unseen benefits of taking part in research. And EJS-ACPD is not alone. It's not acting in isolation here. It's not in its own little silo. There are multiple multi-arm clinical trial platforms either being built around the world or up and running already. And we'll go through a couple of those now. The first multi-arm clinical trial platform that was set up was built in Australia a couple of years ago, and it was called the Australian Parkinson's Mission, and it involved multi-arm clinical trials. They're not multi-stage, they're just going to be testing multiple drugs against a single placebo, and they'll come to an end. So they're not continuous, but it's still positive to see that you can build these clinical trials and get them up and running. And the first of these, the APM-001, which was a phase 2 randomized double-blinded 60-week trial of elagliptin, albuterol, milveridone versus a placebo in 240 participants, will be reporting their results in 2026. So that'll be something to look out for this year. And the second study, which is APM-002, is investigating, it's actually quite an interesting design, this one, because it's investigating 2 drugs across 4 arms involving 240 people with moderate severity Parkinson's. So one arm will be ambroxol, a second arm will be doxycycline, a third arm will be the combination of both ambroxol and doxycycline, and the fourth arm will be the placebo. So it'll be interesting in a couple of years' time when that reports out as well, to see if the combination of the 2 drugs is having an impact on Parkinson's. Then there's a program in Norway, which is called Sleipnir. And this is an interesting design as well, because this is a phase 2A multi-arm clinical trial platform. And it's designed to quickly de-risk drugs for larger clinical trials. These, if we're going to have conveyor belts of clinical trial platforms. We need to have trial-ready drugs that are ready to go if a particular drug is found to have no benefit and has to be removed. We need to have drugs that are ready on the sideline, ready just to step in and take the other drug's place. So platforms like Sleipnir will be rapidly testing new drugs by testing them in people with Parkinson's for 3 months, exploring firstly safety and tolerability, but also looking at brain penetrance as it getting into the central nervous system, and then looking at target engagement measures that could be used in a larger clinical trial. What assay can we be using, or what tests can we be using in that large clinical trial to make sure that the drug is actually hitting its target? So this is going to be kicking off this year as well with their first round of drugs. Then there's the P2P platform, or the Path to Prevention, which is a large program that's being set up by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And of all the multi-arm clinical trial platforms, this is probably the most exciting and the most ambitious, simply because this platform is going to be testing people before they are diagnosed with Parkinson's. Our definition of Parkinson's is evolving at the moment, and the folks at Michael J. Fox Foundation are looking to cure the condition before it even is diagnosed. And so researchers have developed a new criteria for diagnosing people with what's called alpha-synuclein disease. And then the P2P platform, they're going to be taking people in the stage 2 criteria. So these will be individuals where there's just the hint of clinical symptoms starting to come through, but no real functional impairment yet. So there might be, there are some symptoms that appear very early in the course of Parkinson's, such as the loss of the sense of smell, or the disruption of sleep, and constipation is another one. And then there's also a new biomarker, so a protein that you can look for in blood and cerebrospinal fluid. That protein is alpha-synuclein, and if you have that in your cerebrospinal fluid, you are at a higher risk of developing Parkinson's. But if you have those few early symptoms, but you're not yet starting to present the clinical symptoms of Parkinson's, you would fall into that stage 2 category. And that's where they're going to be testing their drugs to see whether people go on to then be diagnosed with Parkinson's. So if we can stop Parkinson's from progressing at that point, we are basically curing the disease. So that's, this will be a very exciting platform to keep an eye on as it progresses. And they are hoping to get started this year as well. So summarize, multi-arm clinical trial platforms, new adaptive designs are being rapidly built and designed for Parkinson's. We're offering the patient community, so it's not, that shouldn't be committee, that should be community, more opportunities to engage and get attention. And these large consortiums are a very large consortium is being built around this. I forgot to mention that consortium is called GAP. So things to look out for in 2026 is the results of that first Australian Parkinson's mission trial, the launch of the Sleipnir platform, and the third arm of the EJS ACT-PD platform, which will be testing UDCA, is also something to keep an eye out for. And hopefully we'll see the development of other additional trial platforms. So fingers crossed that we see progress and development here. I'm going to move on to some interesting research results. And this is a bit of a hodgepodge, I warn you, a bit of a shopping list. Firstly, a couple of interesting research reports. The one that really got my attention was this paper here. obstructive sleep apnea is a condition that involves the stopping of breathing as we sleep. There'll be people when they sleep quite often have constriction of the throat and air isn't getting through the airway. And this is called sleep apnea. And there's different levels of severity, but it's associated with a higher risk of developing certain diseases. And one of those diseases is Parkinson's. If you look at the graph on the left here, you'll see that this is medical data collected from 1.3 million US military veterans. And across the bottom is the years of follow-up from the point of diagnosis with obstructive sleep apnea. And then up the side is the incidence of Parkinson's per 1,000 people. And what you see in that left-hand graph is that if you're not diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, this is the yellow line we're looking at, you have a typical risk of developing Parkinson's. But if you are diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, your risk goes up, and that's the dark blue line. The dark blue line is a lot higher than the yellow line. And there's different levels of severity. There's mild and there's severe. And if you've got if you've got severe, your risk is even higher than those with mild severity. That's the graph on the right-hand side of the screen there. But there are treatments for obstructive sleep apnea, and they mainly revolve around lifestyle change, such as sleeping on one side. For those who are interested, it's typically the best to sleep on your left arm shoulder, and also avoid alcohol or sedatives. But then there's also another treatment option, which is called CPAP, or continuous positive airway pressure, and it's basically a device that you wear on your face, and it's providing airflow from a small box beside the bed that just continuously passes air and basically forces it down your throat. It is very easy to sleep with. It isn't very disruptive, and people generally agree that it's a better night's sleep. But what was interesting in this particular paper, and what really grabbed the attention, was the fact that if you initiate CPAP treatment early, that is within 2 years of actually being diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, it's associated with a reduced risk of developing Parkinson's. And you see this in the graph. The yellow line are people that have not been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. The red line are individuals, or it's sort of reddish, purplish. That line, people that have been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, but have had no CPAP treatment. And then you've got early versus late CPAP treatment. And the early treatment, which is the light green line, you can see falls between the yellow and that gray line, or the purple line, excuse me. So that indicates that by starting CPAP treatment early, you are reducing the risk of going on to developing Parkinson's. And I thought this was really interesting. Another interesting result came from a clinical trial called Cycle 2, and this just further reinforces the benefits and the need for exercise for people with Parkinson's. This was a home-based, gamified version of cycling, and it was 12 months of 3 times a week for 45 minutes, maintaining a high rate of cadence, so about 75 RPM. And it involved 256 people with Parkinson's, mild to moderate, and those that were on high intensity exercise had a lower rate of motor progression. So again, this just hammers home the importance of actually being active and doing exercise. Then there was the azapd or azathioprine in Parkinson's clinical trial results. azathioprine is an immunosuppressant medication that's used for the treatment of autoimmune conditions. This study was a small study. It involved 60 participants with early Parkinson's, and they were asked to take either azathioprine or placebo for 12 months in a double-blind fashion for the first 6 months. And the treatment was found to be safe and tolerated generally. But what was encouraging was they saw quite interesting results in females in particular. So females across these graphs along the bottom here are the blue lines. And as you see across all of the graphs, the blue line is kind of, while the other lines go upwards, the blue line pops down initially through this 6 to 12 month mark. So azathioprine might be having something interesting, some sort of interesting effect in the fairer sex. Just a couple of additionals. These are just newsworthy bits of information that occurred during 2025. Firstly, we had the approval of adaptive deep brain stimulation across multiple markets. Deep brain stimulation is where a specific area of the brain is stimulated by an electrode. It's been around since the 1980s, but typically it's always involved the same stimulation pattern. So the region that's targeted will just be stimulated continuously with the same pattern of stimulation. And what's amazing about adaptive DBS is that it involves two electrodes, one monitoring brain activity and the other one stimulating. So the monitoring electrode will be recording what's going on in the brain, and it'll be telling a small computer what sort of stimulation the individual is requiring. So instead of having a standard brain stimulation protocol, which is just the same continuous pattern of stimulation, this new adaptive DBS is much more personalized and context dependent. It'll be stimulating based on the individual patient's needs at any particular one time. And the clinical trial results that have been coming out have been extremely impressive with this new technology. Another new.
Simon, if I may interrupt you just for a quick second, just to say that on the fascinating topic of adaptive DBS, we have on our YouTube channel the recording of a webinar with Dr. Alfonso Fasano.
Yes,
he's one of the leaders in the world. And actually, there is an amazing video where he's creating or taking part to an orchestra, a small orchestra of people with PD, obviously not him. He showed us the immediate effect of being able to adapt the stimulation to the symptoms on an iPad with the person he was taking care of next to him, who was a musician. So if anyone wants to go into more in depth on this, please go to our YouTube channel and look at DBS. And that presentation also covered pumps that you may talk about, Simon. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, no, Alfonso is wonderful. And this technology is amazing. He was telling us about how he was doing a consultation with somebody with adaptive DBS. He was in Toronto, where his office is, and they were in the Bahamas, and they were doing it over the internet. It's really amazing. Yes. But you're very lucky to have Alfonso. He very high quality. I feel extremely inferior.
Also a very friendly person, not that you're not friendly like you, but actually very friendly, despite the fact that he's a leader in that area. He's very approachable, very open with.
I know he's wonderful. Yeah,
he's a great person.
Yeah. So yes, pumps. We were going to. This is another area of new symptomatic therapies becoming available. We have the rollout of Produodopa, which is the first subcutaneous 24-hour infusion of levodopa-based therapy. Typically, when you take your levodopa pills, you'll get an enormous rush of levodopa into the blood, and that gives you dopamine in the brain. And then over the next few hours, that levodopa is used up, and you need to take another pill. And you see that on the left-hand side of the screen here in the graph. The purple line is the pills being taken across time over, which has got the line across the bottom of the graph in hours. So you see the purple line spikes with a very high level of levodopa after taking a pill, and then over time it drops down. You take another one, it spikes, and over time it drops down. And this spiking behavior is believed to be associated with some of the side effects potentially of levodopa treatment. And so the continuous delivery, 24-hour infusion of levodopa has always been desirable. And with this new product, Produodopa from AbbVie, the pharmaceutical company AbbVie, it is a tiny little needle with a sticker around it, and you just put this needle in your abdomen, and it will infuse using a pump levodopa just under your skin. And you can see it in the graph there, the blue line, you get a gradual rise of the level of levodopa to a certain point, and then that point is maintained across the entirety of that period of time that's being investigated there, which is about 16 hours. And so this is being rolled out at the moment. They've been very cautious about the rollout. Initially, they were having issues around the injection sites, but you can, there's ways and means of dealing with that. And I've spoken with a lot of people who have said that this is a wonderful new therapy that's certainly helped them with their Parkinson's. In addition, we've also had the starting of some really exciting new clinical trials. One of those is the Blue Rock Therapeutics and Bayer, the pharmaceutical company which owns Blue Rock Therapeutics. They initiated their Expedite 2 study. So this is a registrational phase 3 clinical trial which is investigating cell transplantation for Parkinson's. They are replacing the dopamine cells that have been lost by injecting them back into the brain. It involves growing cells in cell culture and then going through a surgical process where the cells are transplanted into a specific region of the brain. The phase 1 results were very encouraging. The treatment was extremely safe and well tolerated. And over time, they were seeing in some patients increases in the level of dopamine production in the brain. And so now the regulators have let them go straight to a phase 3 clinical trial. And they've already transplanted the first few participants in the study. So this will be something to watch out for going forward as well, the Expedite 2 study. Another clinical trial that involves a bit of brain surgery is the Regenerate PD study. This one's also being conducted by the pharmaceutical company Bayer. They bought a small biotech company called Ask Bio, which is a leader in the world of gene therapy. So rather than treating disease with drugs or cells, they are treating diseases with DNA. They use carefully engineered viruses. They take out all the disease-causing stuff in the virus, and they put in the DNA that they want to produce in cells into the virus, and then they inject that virus into the brain or into the organ that they're interested in. And in this case, they're introducing a bit of DNA that produces a protein called GDNF, or glial cell line derived neurotrophic factor, which has had it's had a very long journey with Parkinson's. You might be familiar with a clinical trial from a few years back. They made a documentary about in Bristol, where people were having GDNF delivered directly into their brains. That was the protein. Here, the brain is going to be producing its own GDNF by the DNA being introduced into the cells. And the phase 1 data is quite encouraging. In the moderate cohort, which is the graph on the right, you can see when the participants are in the off state, the UPDRS scores, which is the clinician-based rating scale that's used in these clinical trials, goes down over time. So this is quite encouraging. But that was an open label study, and what they need to do is have a double-blinded study, and that's what the Regenerate PD study is. It's double-blinded. So some people will be injected with the treatment, and some people won't. So it'll be interesting to see the outcomes of that study as well. And then there's also the ASPRO-PD study. This is one that Cure Parkinson's has been involved with. This is a clinical trial, phase 3 clinical trial testing the cough medicine ambroxol. It's been underway since earlier last year. They're looking for 330 participants to be treated for every day with ambroxol or placebo for a period of 2 years. And we look forward to seeing the results of that as well. But those results won't be available this year, unfortunately. And finally, another clinical trial that got started in 2025 was the prasinezumab phase 3 study. This is coming from the pharmaceutical company Roche. It is an antibody that's designed to target the public enemy number 1 protein for Parkinson's, which is called alpha-synuclein. This protein aggregates and clumps together in the brains of people with Parkinson's. This antibody binds to that aggregated protein and pulls it out and removes it from the body. And the initial clinical trials, in those studies, they didn't see an initial impact, but they followed the participants over time. So in this graph, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, they've got 2 blue lines. Those the dark blue are the people who were treated with prasinezumab from the very start, and the light blue are people who were treated with placebo initially, but then they were changed to prasinezumab from 12 months onwards. And you can see that after 12 months, both those groups of people basically plateau in terms of their motor symptoms. So this is suggestive that something might be happening with this treatment. The grey line here is a external control, which is the PPMI group from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and they are continuing to progress in their Parkinson's symptoms. But what's very interesting in this graph is not so much what's going on with the lines, but also what's going on with the numbers in the bottom. You can see it's the number of participants involved at each stage. This treatment requires individuals to go in every month and get an infusion of the treatment. And usually you'll get a lot of people dropping out of a study if they feel that the treatment is having no effect. And what you see here is that the dropout numbers are very, very low. Most of the people seem quite happy to be still involved with the study at the 4-year period, 4-year time point. Excuse me, I just need some water. So that's another study that was started in 2025, and we look forward to seeing the outcome. It's going to involve 900 people, and there'll be 2 years of treatment, and they will probably follow those people over time after that 2-year treatment period is up as well. And just before we go on to 2026, we have to give a salute and a nod to the movers and shakers for their efforts in 2025 with their Parky Charter. Absolutely amazing, phenomenal movement that they've created, and hoping that it will lead to better things for the Parkinson's community here in the UK, if not further afield. So huge round of applause to them. So what to look out for in 2026? More clinical trial results, but and I don't say this lightly, 2026 is going to be a really important year for our understanding of Parkinson's when it comes to clinical trial results. And just to give you a bit of context to that, before the year 2000, most of the treatments that were being tested in people with Parkinson's to try and slow down the condition were designed around the concept of neuroprotection. By protecting the cells, can we slow down the condition and have a better outcome? Then in the year 1997, we found the first, some of the first proteins associated with the underlying biology of Parkinson's, or what we suspect is the underlying biology of Parkinson's. So alpha-synuclein, this protein that I said was the number one, public enemy number one, was discovered in 1997, and they found it in the brain cells of people with Parkinson's. These structures called Lewy bodies were contained alpha-synuclein protein. And then a couple of years later, well, 1 year later actually, was the protein Parkin. Another one called DJ1 was discovered in 2000. There was a gold rush during this period of proteins and biological pathways being discovered that was associated with an increased risk of developing Parkinson's when there were genetic risk factors involved. Just to hammer home that just because you have a genetic risk factor doesn't mean you are going to go on to develop Parkinson's, but it just puts you at a higher risk of actually developing the condition if you carry one of these genetic risk factors. So then in the 2010s, there was an enormous effort by biologists to work out the biology of these genetic risk factors. What were the biological pathways involved with in cells? What were they doing in the wider body? And tests and assays and drugs were starting to be designed and developed around these biological pathways, modulating the activity, and tested in models of Parkinson's. And now we're at the really exciting stage where some of this precision biology is being tested in cohorts of people with Parkinson's. So biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies are finally clinically testing some of these targeted agents. Prasinezumab, we were just talking about before, the Roche drug, that's an example of this, where they're targeting alpha-synuclein and removing it from the brains of people with Parkinson's to see if that will slow down the condition. Another example is a protein called LRRK2, or leucine-rich repeat kinase 2. It is a very busy protein in the cell. It does lots of different functions, but about 1% of the people with Parkinson's, the overall Parkinson's population, carry a genetic variation in the DNA that produces the protein LRRK2, and the result is a very hyperactive form of the protein. So this protein, with all of its various functions, suddenly becomes hyperactive, and in the carefully balanced confines of a cell, a hyperactive protein is like a bull in a china shop. And so what researchers have been trying to do is identify proteins that will inhibit this hyperactivity, and hopefully that will slow down the progression of the condition. And the cells involved will be less stressed. And the leaders in this field have been a biotech company called Denali Therapeutics, and they've partnered up with Biogen, and they've been conducting 2 clinical trials. The first one is called LUMA, and the second one is called Beacon. LUMA involves 650 people with Parkinson's being tested for 48 weeks, and the results of that study will be out in the second half of this year. And Beacon is a 12-week study involving 50 people with the LRRK2 genetic variation form of Parkinson's, and those results will hopefully be out before the end of the year as well. So this is a very important set of studies that we're looking out for this year. It'll be telling us whether some of our hypotheses about the biology underlying Parkinson's could be right or could be wrong. So it'll be interesting to see what this data tells us. And they're not the only ones in this space. There's another company called Neuron 23. They've got the new LRRK study. This is a 12-month treatment period with their LRRK2 inhibitor called NEU411 in 150 people with LRRK2-driven Parkinson's. So it'll be interesting to see these results as well. If not at the end of the year, hopefully very early in 2027. Another one of these biological pathways associated with Parkinson's is a waste disposal pathway that involves a protein called GCase, or glucocerebrosidase. GCase is the easier way of saying it. About 5 to 10% of the people with Parkinson's will have a genetic variation in their DNA in an area called the GBA1 gene, and that results in reduced levels of activity of this protein called GCase. Now, GCase is involved, it's what we call a lysosomal enzyme, and that means that it's involved in the waste disposal systems of cells. And even people with idiopathic Parkinson's appear to have reduced levels of GCase activity. So here, instead of trying to inhibit the activity of a protein, researchers have been looking for treatments that will elevate GCase activity. And one of the leading programs in this area has been conducted by the Portuguese biotech company called Bial. And they've had a phase 2 study that's called Activate, and it's testing their GCase activator, GBA, where am I getting G from? BIA 286156, or it's recently been renamed Parasitic, and they've been testing it in 237 people with Parkinson's, and these results will be announced in 2026 as well. So there are 2 different doses of this drug being tested against a placebo arm over a 78-week double-blinded treatment period. So it'll be interesting to see what this study tells us. And we were talking about the ASPRO study before, which is testing the drug Ambroxol. Ambroxol is also a GCase activator, or it elevates levels of GCase in the brains of people with Parkinson's. So that's of a similar nature. But this study, this one here, the Activate study, will be reporting its results before the Ambroxol, the ASPRO PD study. And finally, mitochondria. These are the energy, the batteries or the power stations of cells. And mitochondrial dysfunction has long been associated with Parkinson's. Some of these genetic risk factors that we talk about are associated with proteins that deal specifically with mitochondrial activity. And so researchers have been looking at trying to bolster or bump up mitochondrial activity. And a large clinical trial has been conducted in Norway called the NOPARK study. It was conducted over a 12-month treatment period in 410 individuals with Parkinson's, testing a supplement called nicotinamide riboside. And in 2026, we'll get the results of this study. So it'll be interesting to see what impact modulating mitochondrial activity has on Parkinson's. So a lot of important clinical trial results will be coming in 2026. The first efficacy results for multiple LRRK2 inhibitor trials, the first efficacy results for some of the GCase activators, and also efficacy results for mitochondrial modulation. Can these, by attacking these pathways, can we slow down the progression of Parkinson's? Really important questions, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll have a clearer understanding of it all. That's why I say that it's a very important year in terms of some of these clinical trial results. In addition to these important clinical trial results, we also have the initiation of some really important trials. There's a biotech company called Spur Therapeutics out of Stevenage, of all places. And they've developed a GBA1 gene therapy approach. So one of these, instead of using GCase activators to increase levels of glucocerebrosidase in the brain, these folks are going in and delivering the DNA that provides the instructions for making glucocerebrosidase directly into cells in the brain. So that'll be interesting to see as they initiate phase 1 clinical testing this year. And we're hoping to see the initiation of a phase 2 trial by a Finnish biotech company called Herantis Pharma. They've been phase 1 testing a new molecule, which is it mimics the activity of a protein called cerebral dopamine neurotrophic factor, or CDNF. This is very similar to GDNF, which we were talking about earlier. And we're hoping to see the phase 2 trial of this kick off in 2026. The second big thing I'm looking out for in 2026 is the World Parkinson's Congress. Every 3 years this is held, and it is, in terms of medical research meetings, it is extremely unique. I can think of no other medical condition around that has a meeting of this type. So this is a meeting where patients are central, not only to the meeting itself, but also to the organizing and the setting up of it. And it's almost as if the researchers and the clinicians are secondary, and they turn up, they're invited to turn up. But it's an amazing meeting in that there is something absolutely for everyone. It's 4 days, and if you want to learn about diet, if you want to learn about exercise, if you want to learn about massage, it's all there. If you want to learn about clinical trials, if you want to learn about devices, it's all there. If you want to learn about deep brain stimulation, it's all there, all in one place. There are poster sessions. You can walk up and you can talk to the researchers standing in front of their research and ask them to explain it to you in plain English. It's good experience for the young researchers to be put on the spot like that. You can sit in the main auditoriums. There are multiple large auditoriums with people explaining their research and providing overviews of whole fields of Parkinson's research. So you can learn a great deal. And then there'll be small satellite rooms where specific topics could be discussed, such as constipation or sleep disturbance or diet. You can get a lot of information. In addition, there's a large exhibit hall where biotech companies and device companies, publishers, all sorts of companies are presenting their wares. So it's a very large meeting. Typically 5,000 people, 4,000 to 5,000 people turn up. And it's a very, very full agenda. Every hour of every day, there are multiple things on offer. So I highly recommend it if you are able to attend. It is truly a magnificent event. And then finally, just a couple of interesting bits of research that we're hoping to see in 2026. This is mainly around the idea of treatment, clinical trials kicking off. So the DAPA PD trial will be initiated in 2026. This involves 36 people with Parkinson's being treated with a anti-inflammatory drug called dapansutral for up to 12 months. The first 6 months being randomized and double-blinded, whereas the second 6 months will be open label with everybody on the drug itself. And that's being conducted out of the University of Cambridge by Dr. Caroline Williams-Gray. Then there's a study called DSpark, which is just being initiated now in Norway. This is a controlled, double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial of a protein called D-serin in 100 people with Parkinson's. Participants will be treated for 58 weeks. And the trial was initiated because there was some very compelling data from a small but short pilot study. And what we need to see is a much longer test of this molecule to see if these results can be validated. And finally, Veritro Therapeutics, they're formerly known as Axial Therapeutics, have got a molecule that is gut restricted, so it doesn't actually enter the body, it just passes through the gastrointestinal system. And they're going to be conducting phase 1 testing of their molecule, VT5006, in 84 healthy volunteers and participants with Parkinson's. So it'll be interesting to see this kick off as well. So if anyone is still awake, there was a lot of interesting research that was conducted in 2025. The GLP-1 agonists, obviously, it was disappointing not to see more encouraging results there, but I wouldn't say the field is dead. I think it's simply a matter of there's still a lot to learn with regards to that class of drug. The data from double-blinded studies suggests it's having some sort of interesting effect. But then in other double-blinded studies, we saw no effect. So the field needs to sit down and review the data and consider what next steps to take. There was, again, more data reinforcing exercise, and this should be encouraged. And we had new treatments options being rolled out with adaptive deep brain stimulation and the pumps for levodopa, and new clinical trial platforms, providing exciting ways for the community to get engaged with the research. And hopefully in 2026, we'll have this important year of clinical trial results that will hopefully fundamentally alter our understanding of Parkinson's. Lots of new clinical trials kicking off, and of course the WPC meeting. And I'm going to stop there, and we'll see if anyone's still listening. Thank you very much, though.
Simon, I can tell you we have more than 200, close to 250 people who have been listening to you. So I saw very few of them bailing out before the end. So it is, you have kept us holding your breath. So thank you very much for this presentation. To the audience, I wanted to say we have half an hour now, between now and the end of this presentation, to go through the questions. I see we already have 24 questions. I'm just basically saying, I just don't know how many we'll be able to answer, but I don't want you to be too disappointed. So please hold back a tiny bit, and I will still try to get the questions that I think are the most important to our audience. A question from Shafiq basically says that with the idea that PD manifests in individuals differently, for the GLP-1R agonist, did they try to see similarities between patients that we might learn from? So was it working with certain people better than with others?
Yeah, so that's a lot of that research is ongoing at the moment, where they're digging into, Professor Fultonay and his team are digging into those individuals who were pre-diabetic, or those individuals who were more tremor dominant. With a big cohort like the 200 people that were involved in the study, they can actually start to do some of that subset analysis. And hopefully we'll see some of that data coming out in the new year. Or this year, this year.
Yes, exactly. I also have a question concerning the multi-arm, multi-stage platforms. Is there such a platform in Canada as far as you know, or should people who are based in Canada try to volunteer in the US?
I'm not aware of one in Canada at the moment. And the US currently is the P2P platform, which is the prodromal. I'm not aware of a multi-arm platform for people diagnosed with Parkinson's yet, but that might change this year. We'll see.
So still on the MAMS, on the multi-arm, multi-stage trials, David from Germany is asking whether the placebo must match a change in treatment. So because basically people might just be placebo for treatment number one, therapy number one, then placebo for therapy number two. But those two therapies might, for instance, have different ways of being implemented. So for instance, different type of pills or different type of injections. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so one of the working groups involved with the setting up of the EGS platform were focused on this particular task, the statistics around it. And at the moment, the platform's only dealing with drugs that are oral, but hopefully further down the line, they're hoping that they can have injectables or other treatment options. And it'll be a case of having a portion of the placebo taking similar delivery systems. But yeah, these are some of the challenges that are faced by these platforms.
So a totally different question now. Lisa is asking for your thoughts about the beach band. And actually, I would just expand the question that I'd more to vibrotactile technologies in general, because we have seen the Q1 in the past, we have seen Peter Tass at some point with his magical glove, but we haven't heard from him anymore. So vibrotactile or beach band, what do you think?
Um, I'm encouraged by some of what I see, but what we need is carefully designed clinical trials to tell us if it's actually a real effect or not. Unfortunately, with Parkinson's, we get this placebo response quite often. And the example I give is the cell transplantation studies back in the 1980s and 90s, where a lady was a part of that one of those trials, and being told that she was going to be cell transplanted, and she went into the clinic almost in a wheelchair, walked out of the clinic a few days later after the surgery, started hiking in the hills and doing all of her old favorite things, and then 18 months later was told that she's on the placebo arm. And I'd love to know what was happening in her brain and what happened in the moments after she was told. But it's a very, very, very powerful effect, and I haven't seen enough placebo-controlled clinical trials on this on these devices to really be able to give an opinion.
I understand. Luis is basically telling us that he's been 5 years diagnosed 5 years ago. He's taking no medication for PD, but he's taking Ambroxol and B3NR. I don't know what NR means, but he's asking for your opinion about that combination in the absence of any levodopa-based treatment.
I can't comment on these things, unfortunately. I don't know the medical history involved, and as long as it's all being done safely with a clinician's knowledge, that's all I can recommend.
He's being supported by his neurologist, so we'll leave him at that. David is asking, what role do you see for ferroptosis in Parkinson's disease? I don't know what ferroptosis is, but hopefully you do. And and do you see interest for ferroptosis inhibitors in Parkinson's disease?
So ferroptosis is a type of cell death that occurs, and it involves the accumulation of iron on a very basic level. And previously, there have been efforts to remove iron and using iron chelators, which is a class of drug. And there's been interesting results there. Ferroptosis is becoming more nuanced. So they've developed ferroptosis inhibitors. And at present, most of them are still in the preclinical, very early clinical stages of being tested. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. My only thought is ferroptosis the only mechanism involved? If you block ferroptosis, is it going to impact constipation and all of these symptoms, or should it be considered as part of more of a combinatorial approach? That's my only current thought.
So Suzanne is asking about the autoimmune trial where there were positive and good effects on women. And she's asking if this is still in a trial phase or can it already be prescribed? I guess it's more a trial phase, but...
Yeah. So azathioprine was a proof of concept study. It's a bit of a sledgehammer when it comes to dampening down the immune system. And what Dr. Williams-Gray and colleagues who conducted that study are now doing is trying to tease out exactly what part of the immune system could be involved. There are problems with taking azathioprine. If you take the drug long term, you could start to develop cancers or other dangerous side effects. So it's not really a drug that we can consider for long-term chronic treatment. But if we are seeing a gender-specific or effect occurring with anti-inflammatories, then that's really quite interesting.
So Marco says that he's a side sleeper, and this is about the CPAP, the continuous positive airway pressure therapy. He says he's a side sleeper with mild RBD and OSA, and he's using CPAP. And he's asking, why is the left side preferred to the right side for sleeping? I don't know if it's a question for you. It's a question maybe for one of our sleep specialists. We don't have many, but we had one last year, Sebastian, the Dutch professor.
I am going solely by what I've read, and I cannot remember the reason for it, but I just remember the reason being if for obstructive sleep apnea, you sleep on your left shoulder as opposed to your right. I can't imagine it really makes a big difference as long as you're not sleeping on your back and your throat is your airway is becoming constricted.
Yes. So Thomas is asking us about the Anovis buntanetap trial and the 3-year open label extension study as an mRNA inhibitor of alpha-synuclein. He wanted your opinion on this trial. Do you see some mileage in that one compared to some others?
So what was the trial?
The trial is buntanetap, the Anovis Bio buntanetap.
Anovis, yes, the Anovis Bio, yes.
Yeah.
So Anovis has just announced that they're going to be starting a phase 3 open label study. Their molecule is based on an old protein drug called Posifen, and there's a lot of preclinical data supporting Posifen against alpha-synuclein. And it's one of these studies that's going to be that's targeting very specific biology, this alpha-synuclein protein. So it'll be interesting to see. It's open label, so they'll have to use objective endpoints such as whatever is happening in blood or cerebral spinal fluid as outcomes. Otherwise, there's the risk of a placebo response, I guess. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
So a friend of yours, Randall, says, yes, Simon, he's in Toronto. Is he? Yes, that's right. He says, you're a Parkinson rock star, and I would agree to that. Thanks for all you do from us, PWPs, Randall from Toronto. But he also has a question. Can you see the Prodiodopa system being used in conjunction with the adaptive DBS? Can you do both simultaneously?
We're not there yet, but you could see it. You could see this potentially. I'm not sure if it's if they're both ideally designed at the moment for that outcome, but one of my worries is that the symptomatic treatments are getting so good that it's going to make it very challenging to determine when we're seeing a disease-modifying effect, and that's already challenging enough. Yes. So, but yeah, I mean, some of the adaptive deep brain stimulation studies, some of the results are really, really impressive. But it's an intriguing idea. Hopefully, adaptive DBS is working well enough that you can reduce your medication. So if pump is if levodopa is still required, yes, you could be taking in a very, very low dose over the course of the day, just having it continuously infused. Another possibility is that you don't need the pump at all. There was research published this year that was done in mice, but they were giving the mice a bacteria, and the bacteria was producing levodopa. And as it passed through the gut, it just the bacteria just keeps producing this constant level of levodopa. So that's another possibility. So we'll see how it evolves.
So I mentioned earlier the webinar we did a few months ago with Alfonso Fasano, and that webinar had two components. The first one was adaptive DBS, and the second chapter, so to speak, was the pumps. I don't remember the question coming up of asking whether both should be used in synchronicity, but actually this is an interesting presentation. And as you say, I think, Simon, the idea is that with adaptive DBS or DBS, you might be able to reduce your drug consumption, but not necessarily get rid of it entirely. And the reason for the pump is for people who have such fluctuations that they can no longer take care of their levodopa needs through the pills. So if the DBS works well, you might indeed hope that actually they don't need the pump. They could go back to a smaller quantity of regular pills. David in Germany, again, has a good question, and I know this is one that will be close to your heart. He's asking about repurposed drugs. And I think his question is, his feeling is that the appetite from pharmaceutical companies might be bigger, of course, to sell new drugs and make more money. But do you, as a charity, or do you think that the world has enough investment to pursue all the right opportunities of repurposing drugs? Is it sufficiently supported?
Yes, but it's important to state that drug repurposing should be seen as proof of concept. It is very, very challenging to take it all the way through to the regulatory stage. If you don't have a drug manufacturer involved and they can see a market where they can sell a drug. So with the exenatide, for example, we were testing it and there were biotech companies around that were producing their own version of a GLP-1 agonist, such as Korea Therapeutics, as we were talking about. And so the point of drug repurposing is proof of concept, and then these third parties will step in and take things forward, as long as you can demonstrate proof of concept, because it is just really, really challenging to get a new label for a drug if there's no intellectual property or profit to be made. Extremely challenging.
Yes. I have a question from Tim that I'm not going to put to you, actually, Simon, but I'm just going to help Tim find the information. Tim is saying that we covered stem cell therapy at Blue Rock in the USA, and he's asking for an update in other parts of the world, really. So, Tim, we had the pleasure of listening to Roger Barker, Professor Roger Barker, in December, like a month, not even a month ago, on that topic. So you will find on your YouTube channel a whole session on that. It will be more than you can hope for. So I will not use this time to do this, but please look at the channel. Benjamin Stecher. Hello, Benjamin. You're a bit of a celebrity in the Parkinson's world. It's great to have you on our webinar. And a question for you, Simon, I think. He says, how has all that we have learned about Parkinson's disease altered, Simon, your own definition of the disease? Do you still see it as a disease, a syndrome, a condition?
I refuse to answer any questions coming from Ben. Next question, please.
All right.
No.
I'm joking too.
Yeah, so when I started out in a small biotech company in the backwaters of third world New Zealand called Neurons. And we thought we were really cute because we had NZ on the end of the name. And the folks across the road at Auckland Medical School called us morons with NZ on the end of that. But we were developing a drug and we were testing it across different neurological conditions. And this is where I got introduced to Parkinson's, because I thought of all the conditions, Parkinson's was the most solvable problem. You've got very specific populations of cells that are being lost and resulting in the symptoms, and it's progressive. So, surely this is a problem-solving exercise. Shouldn't take too long. 20 years later, here we are. And what I appreciate now, part of my training was in Roger Barker's lab, and I spent a lot of time in the clinic in his lab. And it's there that I really discovered how individual this condition is. Everybody is so very, very different. So my definition of Parkinson's in my head is vastly different. It's no longer a single disease. It's a collection of diseases that simply manifest themselves in the same sort of way. And with all these treatments that are being developed, we need to be really, really, really carefully thinking about how we're targeting them to the right people. But there's a lot of work going on in that area of patient stratification. So, fingers crossed, it won't take another 20 years.
Absolutely. So Shafiq and Tim both have a question about exercise. I'm not going to put that to Simon because actually I would like to direct you both to a great webinar with Professor Bas Bloom in December 24 that is entirely dedicated to exercise and why is it important, what should you do, etc., etc. But a question for you actually, Simon, from Mike. So you're frozen, Simon. Can you still hear me? I hope Simon will come unstuck in a second. Mark, you can hear me, right? Good. Oh, here it is.
I'm not sure what happened there. I think
Oh, you're back. Perfect. No worries. It's all good.
sorry.
So the question from Mike is actually something that would almost keep me awake at night, but I don't sleep so well anyway. But his question is really, is there a risk that when we do a trial, if we have not pre-selected segments of the Parkinson's population, we basically end up with negative or poor results, while actually the treatment works perfectly well for a subset we have not identified yet? And I think that Alberto was talking about that a while back, in just saying that actually, when you basically say we just want people who have been on have had Parkinson's for 5 years, if we don't filter the people coming in, we get poor results coming out.
Yep, 100%. Yes, it's a major concern for the field at the moment. We really have to focus on patient stratification, so we're targeting the right people with the right drugs or treatments.
So Suzanne is asking about the Symbic PD device, and actually I would widen the question to red light or biophotomodulation in general. There have been some trials recently, and there are a few that are still ongoing. What is your view? Do those trials give us some solid information that can determine whether we go for the therapy or not?
So there've been a couple of trials where they've been carefully controlled studies. There was one presented at the MDS meeting in Hong Kong a couple of years back, and though that's sort of hinted at encouraging signs, but unfortunately the majority, it's a very challenging clinical trial to conduct because everybody's exposed to light. How do you have a placebo in those cases? But yeah, at present, I haven't seen enough, and maybe I've missed the results, but I haven't seen enough to sway me.
Good. I heard actually, I don't have the details just on the tip of my fingers, but there is a webinar by friends of ours in Glasgow, UK, who are going to be presenting some research results on that topic in early February. I don't know, Mark, if you have seen the details from Mark Prana.
I'll have a quick look right now so I can put it on the chat.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So back to Simon. Charles has a question. We mentioned exercise, but we didn't mention diet. Is there any research in 25 or 26 that you have seen or that you will be watching on the topic of the food we put in our bodies, which is, I think, quite important?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of specific trials or studies. They're not jumping to mind. I would do a search for Laurie Mitchley. If you're interested in this topic, she's been leading this field for quite a while. I believe you've had her on the platform several times. So yeah, she would be more the authority on this topic than I am.
So once again, I would then direct people in the audience looking for information on nutrition to do a couple of things. To go to our YouTube channel again, please. There is a section called Nutrition where there are 2 presentations by Laurie Mitchley, and 2 presentations by Matthew Phillips from New Zealand that covers things such as fasting or keto diet, etc. And the second thing is that we have already invited people in our community to participate, to listen to a webinar on the 29th of January on the topic of diet and nutrition. So if you haven't seen the invitation, please go to the YouTube channel, go to our website and get registered, but you should normally get the invitations in the next few days. And thank you, Mark, for putting on the channel for the Glasgow team who will be covering red light therapy. So Levino is asking about the UDCA study, and he seems to remember that in 2022 it was found to be ineffective. I can't remember that. But if it is correct, why is it still on the list of active trials?
So yeah, this is where patient stratification starts to play a role. They conducted this small pilot study with UDCA, ursodeoxycholic acid. It's a liver and bile acid treatment. It goes after gallstones. It was safe and it was tolerable, and there was hints of stuff, but nothing amazing or stand out. But then they did some post hoc analysis. So this is analysis that's done after the study has been conducted, and you're looking at the data and trying to tease out interesting trends. It's hypothesis generating stuff. But what they found was that when they looked at the DNA of people, specifically the DNA that's in the mitochondria, those who had higher mitochondrial genetic risk factors responded better to UDCA than those who had lower. So you're starting to see patient stratification coming in there. If you can take a person's blood and identify them as one of the those individuals with mitochondrial DNA mutations as opposed to not having those mutations, then we can analyze the drug just in that specific population of people. And on a platform like the ACT-PD platform, where you're going to have 400 people taking UDCA, you'll be able to extract a lot of that sort of data. And that'll be a good test of the proof of principle there.
Thank you, Simon. Ashley is basically a medical student, and he's asking you if you had to pinpoint one area, where do you see the future of Parkinson's research heading in the next 5 years? Now, in a sense, that's valid for a student, but also for us, the Parkinson's community. Is there one area do you think has carries more opportunities than other?
So yeah, hi Ashley. I'm probably the worst person to ask because I'm trying to cover lots of different areas, and I think all of it's fascinating. I do look at some areas, and I wonder about the application of it. For example, with cell transplantation, it would be interesting to get Roger Barker's thoughts on this. But you're transplanting young cells into the brain, and it's going to take 3 or 4 years for those young cells to evolve into mature dopamine cells. So patients who take part in those kind of trials shouldn't expect immediate responses. It's going to be 2 years down the line before they start to see the impact of that. And you sort of ask yourself, if you were a patient, would you be going for a cell transplantation approach, or would you be looking more at adaptive DBS, which will give you an immediate response? And then there's research into dyskinesias. But if the continuous levodopa pumps are becoming mainstream, and we don't get these spiking, these issues associated with the spiking of levodopa levels, then maybe dyskinesias will become a thing of the past. There's broad trends like this, but whether I have a hard time placing my bets. I'm just an observer as opposed to a trendsetter.
So I will basically ask you one last question, actually, Simon. Maybe I will answer one that is for me. Randall was asking me, Michel, a question for you. What is your experience with the beach band? So my experience with the beach band has not been conclusive, and I've used it for 2 weeks, and actually I've stopped afterwards. Maybe I should have carried on for longer. I know that Mark has had a better experience than me, and there is, if you want to say something, Mark, about that.
Yeah, I've worn it a bit more consistently than you. I found initially it helped with my movement, particularly in playing sport. Just getting around the court, being more involved in the game as well, being more conscious of what's going on. So I'm persevering with it. It's not been any major changes since then. But there's a little hit and miss. But I think it's one of those things that progressively builds up and does have a positive effect. So fingers crossed. But I agree with Simon. We need some solid research to back up what is so far anecdotal evidence.
Thank you, Mark. So the last question for you, Simon, because we have reached our 90 minutes, and I would just, that one is interesting from Charles. He says he's left with the impression that most of the focus in research is on motor symptoms. And he's asking about what about the plethora of non-motor symptoms? He's mentioned gastrointestinal issues, but there are plenty of others, of course. Is that a fair reflection from Charles, you think, Simon?
Yes, absolutely. So we put out a report each year on the clinical trial landscape. And this year's report is going to not just be a single 12-month snapshot, but it's looking at 10 years of clinical testing, clinical trials. And there's lots of interesting trends across that 10 years. But something that's quite apparent is that non-motor symptoms are becoming more and more important, and not important, but more and more addressed by these clinical trials. It's being acknowledged that non-motor symptoms are basically half, if not more than half, of what we're dealing with. And it's good to see this because constipation, sleep disturbance, cognitive issues, all sorts of things, they all come into play and they need to be addressed. So it's a very good point Charles makes.
Thank you, Simon. So to our audience, I just wanted to say that we have covered as many questions as we could, but there are quite a few unanswered questions from you. I would recommend, please, that you have a look at our YouTube channel. It has been given a spring clean, still in the midst of the winter a few days ago. You will find it much easier to navigate than in the past. I'll just take an example. Someone was asking me about keto diets. Now, we haven't covered that today, but there is in the nutrition segment, for instance, Dr. Matthew Phillips in New Zealand, who is basically holding a whole session about that. So just as an example, so don't feel that if your questions haven't been answered, you can't necessarily get the information on the channel. So we have reached the end of our time today. Thank you so much, Simon, for that incredibly insightful overview of the research landscape. A recording of the session will be available on our YouTube channel and Spotify today or the next day at the latest. So thank you all for joining us tonight and for your brilliant questions. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on the 29th of January, which will be a joint event with our friends from PD Buddy, focusing on the best diets for people with Parkinson's. This will be part of a 12-month series. There will be 12 series, a bit like on Netflix. It will be one season, 12 episodes. And the first one is on the 29th of January. So thank you all. Thank you, Simon. And I wish you everyone, again, a very healthy and happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.